And sadly, it's kind of something that's almost, I don't want to say embarrassing, but kind of embarrassing when you have your kids out, you go to the barbecue, you go do things, and then there's other dads there and other people there saying, oh, what do you do? What's going on? What brought you here? And then you have to say, oh, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And then there's like a moment and they look at you, oh, okay, that's good for you, buddy, to kind of pat you on the back type of thing. And I don't know if that's what they think, but that's what goes on in my head. And it took me a few years to get comfortable with it and kind of accept it and then say, I get to do this.
Justin, you are a very interesting man. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm about to give a marvelous intro. Any last words before I tell everyone your life story?
No, let's just have a nice convo and have some fun and try not to use filler words. That's what I keep telling myself.
Me too. I'm even thinking about hiring a coach. A buddy of mine, Jordan, he's got a big podcast.
Okay.
He has a coach for that.
Really?
I've actually specifically said to the lady that I hire for editing, leave all of the filler words in, because as I listen back through the podcast to check them,
you'll notice them
will punch me in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I did an episode
watching form.
I did an episode. I had a parenting podcast. I'm a stay-at-home dad, and we'll probably talk about that at some point, or I used to be, and I'm starting to get back into the workforce, but I was doing kind of a parenting stay-at-home dads podcast with another stay-at-home dad friend of mine. And it was one of the first episodes we did. And he said 1,000 times. It was bad to where people were coming up to me saying, what is going on there? And then I started saying it. So it was just this, and it was awful. It was rough. So I'll try to hold myself away from those.
It's funny the verbal tics that we can have, right? Yeah. Anyway, onto my marvelous intro.
Yes.
So you're a former diesel mechanic and a stay-at-home dad living in the great flyover state of Indiana. Born in Alaska, grade school in the Midwest, you spent most of your adult life living in Vegas, which was your favorite city, well, the city that you love.
Yeah.
Your stay-at-home dad life didn't start until 2019, so 7 years ago, when you moved from Vegas to Indianapolis to relocate for your wife's job in pharma. And the past 6 years have been eye-opening, you say, and life-changing, because you've gone from typically quite laborious job to taking care of your 1 and 4-year-old who are now 7 and 10, your daughters, so cooking meals, tending to the house while trying not to lose yourself in the process. You have started making content on YouTube. You've got a stay-at-home dad's podcast. You enjoy golf. Not that you consider yourself particularly good at golf. I don't think anybody does. Very humbling game. Very maddening game. And you love cars, books, history, nonfiction. And there's one comment here I have bolded where you said, I'd be a liar if I said I loved working out, but I do 4 days a week, because if I don't, well, and now that your daughters are 7 and 10, you've started a small business, cleaning out garages and installing upscale storage and organizational systems. You are a busy man.
Yeah, it's getting there, yeah.
Yeah. How was that transition from your hard mechanic job to being a stay-at-home dad?
It was hard to transition to, there I said a filler word, but you get used to that routine. You get up, you go to work, you take care of your kids, get them off to the daycare, then you go to your job and you do stuff, and then come home and spend an hour with your children, put them to bed, and then rinse and repeat every single day. And then when my wife came home from her corporate offices at the time, we're here in Indiana, and she came home from a meeting and said, hey, they offered me this job, blah, blah, blah. And it kind of flashed before my eyes, and I was like, oh, great, here we go. So went and quit my job, talked to my boss, said, hey, we're moving across the country. And it was really hard for me to accept it, that, okay, my career, whatever you want to call it, is over, and then let's move to Indiana. And at that point, I was like, do I want to go back to that work? And at the time, my wife had kind of crazy hours. She was going downtown every day and working 12 hours a day doing marketing stuff for a drug company. And I said to her, I said, hey, if we can swing it, since I'm already unemployed, how about I stay home with my kids or our kids and then just go from there and see how this works out. And worst case scenario, I can go back to work. So that's what I did. And it was kind of a hard pill to swallow for a while. And sadly, it's kind of something that's almost, I don't want to say embarrassing, but kind of embarrassing when you have your kids out, you go to the barbecue, you go do things, and then there's other dads there and other people there saying, oh, what do you do? What's going on? What brought you here? And then you have to say, oh, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And then there's like a moment and they look at you, oh, okay, that's good for you, buddy, to kind of pat you on the back type of thing. And I don't know if that's what they think, but that's what goes on in my head. And it took me a few years to get comfortable with it and kind of accept it and then say, I get to do this. I chose this. And there is so many dads out there that can't do this. So it kind of was a mindset shift to where I said, you know what, I love this. And now that's what's more important to me now. And that's with me starting this business that I'm doing still allows me to do that and make my own hours and work for myself, but then still be dad when I need to be dad. So.
Yeah, because they're both at school,
Mm-hmm.
And now they're 7 and 10, right? So you
Yep.
have that time during the day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would imagine part of that is people's reaction where it takes them a second. They haven't got any line that they've perhaps used before in response. Because you can ask someone, what do you do? And almost whatever they answer, you've heard it before and you've got a line that you can say.
Right.
And you feel pressured to respond with something interesting when someone says what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then because it's so unusual, they probably just hadn't thought of it before. And then part of the surprise is also that.
Oh,
What do I say here?
right.
Right.
Catches them off
You could
guard a little
think
bit.
of, like 10 things to say 10 seconds later, but it's now too late, right?
Moment's gone. Yeah.
The moment's gone, exactly.
Yep.
Now, 2019, this is also the time that you said that you started working out for the first time.
Yeah. Well,
Do I have that correct?
I worked out. So
Mm.
prior to kids and prior to getting married and all that, my wife and I, we lived together before we got married and we didn't have kids and we would go work out, but there was no plan. It was just just go in and do some of these and do some, and there was no structure. There was no workout plan. There was nothing written down. There was no app in my phone that tracked anything. It was just, I'm going to go work out what I see on the internet and TV and kind of do some exercises and do some cardio and then go home. And I did that for years, really, and didn't really have any progress. We belonged to a gym and we would go and I would work out in the evening sometimes. And it was just kind of going through the motions.
You've kindly shared some photos with me in the email. Would you be okay if we flash those up?
Yeah, you can do that
cheap
whenever.
version
Yeah.
of this?
That's
Okay.
fine.
And if I include them in the email that I send, is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I have a picture of yourself here at the 2019 when you've gotten back into things. And I've also got an after picture here. And you've got a big, excuse the French here, guys, earmuffs for any children in the car. If you've got a big shit-eating grin, you've got abs, you're looking like, honestly, really good. Like, really good. Yeah. What time frame was that? And how did you achieve that?
That was, so a little context. So I worked out sporadically and then we moved to Indianapolis and a good friend of mine, my other stay-at-home dad buddy, said, hey, my wife is, she does Beachbody. Do you know what Beachbody is, Andy?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's the online program. It's a program for people that don't know how to exercise. I don't know. So he said,
you into it though, and
yes,
you're in great shape. So we'll
yeah,
no, we absolutely got to give it that. Yeah,
yeah. So it did its job, and it was an 8-week program he wanted me to do. So you've got one photo there. I think I'm in a pair of blue shorts. That's right after moving to Indiana, and he said, hey, let's do this. So I took those before photos before we ever decided to do anything. And then I did 1 or 2 8-week programs back to back. So I did one, it was an 8-week program of Beachbody, and then I just turned around and I rinsed and repeat, immediately did it again. And it was 4 days a week. It was not very heavy weights because it's kind of designed for you to do at home. And it was a ton of high intensity training, jumping and down on the floor and push-ups up to jumps and jumping, all that stuff, and super intense, what I would think. And that's how that came to be of my shit eating grin on my face. So
Yeah. So what happened? Why have you not just gone on for levels and levels and levels above this and carried on improving, rinsing and repeating this?
I got down, so I'm 6'3", 6'4",
Yep.
and my weight got down to probably at its best 190, 189, right in that range. And I felt good. I felt like I looked really good, but I thought I looked really thin. And even my wife can attest. She said, please don't lose any more weight. You look really thin. And I don't know if that kind of sat with me, that I don't want to just be a skinny guy. Sure, I've got abs and stuff, but I think that's the trap that all men get into, right? I think there's a little level of body dysmorphia that goes on with men as well, that I want to be big. I want to be bigger. I want to be 20 pounds heavier than that and lean, right? And so I started kind of adjusting, and I stepped away from Beachbody, A, because of that, and then B, because I started getting some joint pain. I started having problems with elbows and in my knees were taking, I think, a beating, and maybe that's from all the HIIT exercise and my age, maybe that too. So then I started kind of tapering off of that a little bit, and then still using some of those exercises, but adapting them a little differently. And I think I started changing my diet as well and trying to maybe bulk, but it's hard to commit to a bulk. I think you know that, especially from, I've heard some other episodes on here, and it's hard to commit to that and then start to lose those gains that you see in that photo. It's kind of like, it's a struggle. So I did start going down that road though, and gaining some more weight and trying to, get big.
Okay, so let's pull that thread. So we've got a few things going on here. You've had the comment from your wife that you're starting to look, what were her words?
She said I was starting to look too thin.
Too thin. Okay.
Yeah.
Spindly. Would you say that maybe. Would you say that when you had your shirt off?
Yeah. And it wasn't coming from a malicious place at all. And I think it's something that I saw in myself. Sure, I looked good, like I said, but I think she said she thought it too, like, oh, you just look almost, I don't want to say sickly. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but something along those lines, like, just don't lose any more weight. Don't get any leaner, please, because you're looking almost sickly.
Yeah. How was that to hear?
It wasn't bad, because I think I agreed with it, but it kind of takes a little of the wind out of your sails a little bit when you think of it yourself, like, oh, I put all this work in and I busted my ass, and now I'm not, like, even myself, now I'm still not happy with what I'm seeing. I am, but I want something different, or I want something more. And then coming from her perspective that, oh, you look a little like you should eat a cheeseburger, so it was kind of hard.
How are the people where you're living, size-wise? Are people quite big?
No, they're pretty average, pretty, not athletic, but not overweight, really. No.
Okay. So you weren't like standing out, like, look at that guy kind of
right.
thing, right? It was, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Honestly, if I had my shirt on, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that I could work out. Like, I was of that. If I had clothes on and I didn't have my shirt off, you wouldn't probably even know that I worked out, really.
Yeah, I would say this is stage one. I'd say this is very common. This is, you get into working out, you start looking after your diet. You were doing it perhaps more bust your ass with training rather than actively controlling the diet, it sounds. She didn't even think to bring that up. We can dig back into the diet though.
Sure.
And you got lean. You probably made some dietary changes, but you weren't necessarily actively tracking. Is that correct?
I was tracking haphazardly for a while. I was writing things down in a notebook and then literally going to Google and seeing what they were. And then my wife said, they have an app for that. And I said, wow, this is going to make this much easier because this is a pain in the ass to do this. But yeah.
Okay, so you did that right. Okay, great. And so then you managed to get lean, but your training perhaps wasn't the best. And even if it could have been more optimized and you could have ended up dieting down and had a little more muscle, maybe 5 pounds of raw muscle, because of your height, like 6'3", 6'4", it's the feeling of being too lean, too skinny, if we may use that word. I know that wasn't your wife's word. Can be even more pronounced. So I'm 6'2", 6'2.5". So I understand how that is. I understand how that feels. And, people, they go through these, whenever they have their first real true cut, people are always surprised by how light they have to get before their abs lean. And many people think that they've lost muscle mass, but actually they just didn't have as much as they thought, right? We all think we have more.
Right.
Just how it is, right? So I just want to share that, like, the feeling that you have is common. The feeling that you had is common, and certainly nothing to be ashamed about. But you've definitely achieved that stage 1. I think that's an important stage. What were your hesitations then to bulk up from there?
It was hard, honestly, to every little thing you changed. You add some more to your diet, you adjust your calories, you do this, you do that, and then to slowly see those abs disappear. And I think there were moments where I would look in the mirror and I would try to like flex to see a little bit of an ab still, to like tell myself that it's okay, they're still kind of there, it's going to be fine. And then eventually you do get comfortable just saying, okay, I'm doing something different and my body's going to change. And that also takes a while too, to really kind of come to terms with that and say, my abs are gone. My leanness is no longer for now, but I'm trying to do something else. So yeah, it was kind of a hard pill to swallow to see all that hard work essentially go away, to be honest.
And then you mentioned that you were plateaued for a while. So I know that recently you have been bulking, and you bulked up from about 190 to about 230.
Yeah.
So you really gave yourself a good runway there. But you were plateaued before that. What was it that made you, what was the spark that time that made you want to give a real bulk a proper go?
And I still don't think I gave it like really, but I ate really bad, Andy. I ate not well. I kind of, from the dedicated logging and all that, I still worked out, and I sent you the little spreadsheet, whatever, of what I kind of do, and I kept doing that stuff, and I literally just pushed the logging, and I kind of got out of it, and I said, you know what, I'm just gonna not go crazy. I'm not eating cakes and this and that all the time, but I didn't regulate it all. And I don't think that's a good thing to do, but that's kind of what I did. And I would log a little bit, and now I'm trying to get back into logging now, but it's, when you break that habit, it's kind of hard to get back into weighing everything and making sure your meals are loggable. And that's, I think, something that I have a hard time with, is certain things that I cook or my wife cooks for the family, and it's got all these things in it. I don't know how to log that. So then you kind of skip it. And I think I got into that realm, but I also did tell myself, okay, let's eat some carbs. Let's eat and try to eat over being kind of where my threshold was for I'm full. Like, let's push it a little bit more. And I was doing that for a while. And that's when I saw the scale kind of go up. into that 227, 228 range there.
There are multiple threads that I want to pull here.
Yeah.
There's one, so I'm going to put a pin. There's balancing meals with the family and the trouble logging them.
Mm-hmm.
There is the rate of weight gain, and then so I want to ask you about that. And then there's this concept that you ate badly, which I think is not necessarily the case.
Okay.
So let's pull that first pin. You said it can be difficult to log the meals that you and your wife cook. Certainly understand that. You have two options. If you tend to have the same, like 10 meals that you tend to cook in the house on rotation, which many families kind of fall into that pattern anyway without actually thinking about it or planning it, then you only need to, as long as you pretty much use the same recipe each time, you only need to log everything that goes into that recipe, weigh and log it once. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, no doubt. But that is a fairly accurate way of doing things. And then if you always visually take the same portion size from the family pot, then you're good.
Right.
The key then is going to be not eating your daughter's leftovers if they don't finish everything, or your wife's leftovers, right? You stick to the portion that you put for yourself.
Yes. I do that. I've done that. I'll be honest with you. I did it tonight, but at least it was with the turkey burger. My 7-year-old is going to throw it away, and I said, hey, hold on. Let me snag that quick. So yeah.
Yeah. And you understand why that can be counterproductive to the goals here, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Because it's unlogged calorie right there that I didn't. You don't know. It's unchecked. It's not accounted for.
Well, yeah. You chose not to log it, right? After
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Here. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you put, it's very interesting. Like we just forget to log these things.
Right.
And then our calorie logger will think that we're actually eating less than we are. And then it's going to suggest further decreases to the calorie intake, leading into a spiral, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people on the internet complaining about this, but when you actually dig in, it just comes down to, oh, you're not actually logging everything, are you? A lot of these bites that you're taking throughout the day, they kind of add up.
That handful of chips or that burger or those French fries off your kid's plate, yeah, it goes quick.
Oops. So that is one way. And there's obviously a difficulty there in like wanting to set a good example, but also wanting to set a good example. And these two things are conflicting. What do I mean? The example of finishing your food, be grateful for your food, right? Food is precious. And then there's Dad's trying to do something difficult right now, and it's dieting. And he wants to diet because he wants to be healthy for you guys, because we have a history of heart conditions in the family, and I want to make sure that does not happen to me. And maybe they're a little bit young to be talking about you potentially not being around forever and ever and ever and ever for them.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
There's maybe a conversation to be had around the why it is okay to break the rule of you must eat all your food sometimes for Dad. He's not being a hip.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one option. Yeah. So that's one thing, side tangent. So the other option would be Macrofactor, which is a nutrition logging app that we fought over to Japan. I know it's not one that you're using. It has an AI feature where you can take a photo, and it's pretty good at identifying the calories in that. And it's on the beta right now. But I know that the guys behind it, the Stronger by Science team, they held off of having anything like this for a while because they didn't think the tech was up to it yet. Because a lot of these apps, they just put it into ChatGPT or the equivalent and just pull back an estimate there. This is just not going to be very good. But that would be another option. And you could then snap a photo, have a little scale there, so you can give it the weight of the food, and then it's just going to make everything way more accurate without needing to log everything.
Okay.
So those are two options.
Good.
What were the other pins that we put in our conversation? Rate of weight gain, I believe. And
yes,
there's one other pin. You ate really badly, you said.
Yeah, my opinion, yes.
Your opinion. Okay, so I think this is a particularly interesting one. Justin, what do you mean by I ate really badly?
I went so long scaling everything and weighing everything to get to that point. And I did it there for a while too. I mean, I didn't just dip down to abs and then just immediately shoot back out. I think I held it for a while. I don't know how long, maybe 6 months, maybe more.
That's the right thing to do, because what many people forget is the diet doesn't end the second you get to the point where you're happy. And you have to then come back. Yeah, you get to increase your calories, but you can't just revert to all of your old habits. You want to keep those habits.
Right.
It's a habit forming thing that we're going through, that we're trying to get people to think of as we're going through the coaching with them, so that they don't just suddenly rebound. So you are absolutely right to continue tracking for a while afterwards and gradually work your way out of that and into just going by hunger and fullness. And then eventually this feeling of trying to push past hunger and fullness so that you could keep driving your body weight up. Because your body at a certain point, it just doesn't want to get any larger, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's how I felt that I was there almost just at so, I dipped down and then kind of started coming back out of that after some time. And I was at maintenance maybe for where my body was. And I just felt like getting on the scale, it just wasn't changing. So and then like I said, I kind of got out of the logging habit. I kind of broke that habit. And I felt so from one contrast to the other, I felt like I was eating bad. My wife makes some cookies. I'll have 2 or 3 of those, and then I'd go eat some of this, and we're going out for pizza, or we're doing this or that, and not caring. Which the old me, I would be, let's not do that. Where's the chicken at? Where's the this? Where's the vegetables? Where's the rice? Instead of just kind of embracing life to a degree and just doing whatever I want. And that's kind of what I fell back into, that I felt like I was eating not well. So.
Okay. And maybe to a degree you weren't, because obviously we're comparing here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to dig into whether this would actually, be affecting your goals.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people, they have this idea that they're eating badly because they're having cake or pizza or whatever it is. And I absolutely don't subscribe to that at all. Life has to be lived. It has to be lived. There are times when we want to get tighter, and there are times when it makes sense to, even though, damn, it's delicious, you just can't be having carrot cake. Right, especially at the size of the slices that they're going to serve at your favorite restaurant. Like, you just can't be having that 1,000-calorie cake.
Right. Yeah.
Along with your lunch.
Yep.
Well, it's brunch on a Sunday. It doesn't matter. It's like, no, I'm sorry, it does. Right. Say you're bulking, you've got the calorie budget for it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. Or let's say you're splitting that carrot cake. Hey, you can totally do it. Right.
Yeah.
So let's ask a few questions here. How quickly did you gain weight throughout the bulk? What time frame are we talking about? And what was, say, a period where you were at your fastest rate of gain, and for how long was that? Excluding the first part when you rebounded out of the, rebound is the bad word here, not the right word here, where you came back out of the diet and you had that almost immediate, like 3 to 7 pounds of water gut content and glycogen gain. Where were you from there?
I probably, so lightest 289, 290, or 189, 190. And I probably, when I started to taper off of the extreme dieting and hit workout, I probably crept up to 200. And I leveled off there, and I was right around 200, 205 for over a year. Now we're into 21, 22. I was probably in that mid 200 range. And then I'm trying to think of when I said, okay, let's do a bulk.
Yeah.
But it's always so hard to commit and to properly do it, right? I mean, you've probably dealt with people, and from my experience as well, it's hard to put the calories down for the right bulk, and it's hard to cut the calories for a proper cut, right? So, I was probably decided to do a proper, not in my opinion, a bulk last year, probably 2024, maybe probably summer 2024. I didn't really care that summer bod and all that stuff. It didn't bother me. So I probably started to really work at that last summer and then into the fall. And into the fall of 2024 is when I was really, okay, let's add the calories. Let's eat that sweet potato with this, and let's try to really put some calories down. And that was probably my biggest gain of weight. You know, it crept up from 205 into the 210, into the 212, and then it really from 215 or 210 to almost 230 was over this last winter. So
Okay. Yeah. So like four is you until about March, was it? April?
yeah,
And then you started cutting?
yeah, and then I said, okay, let's taper down here just recently. You know, I got to get the summer bod back in. So then I said, at least I told myself that, okay, let's cut. And I'm trying to do that. And I have seen some scale change. So I went from 228 and now I think I'm right around 218, maybe somewhere in there. 215,
Okay.
depends on the day.
So what you've described there is a fairly steady gain with some plateaus. So you were plateaued for years at around 200, a couple of years there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because you weren't actively pushing for either a cut or a bulk. And your regular hunger and fullness cues just kept you around that level without you necessarily needing to track everything meticulously. And then you decided, okay, I'm going to bulk. It was around summer last year. It's now 10 months later. You've gained 30-ish pounds from that point, slightly less. And it wasn't in sudden spurts. Sure, maybe your weight went up 2 pounds at Christmas and Thanksgiving, etc. Right, but you know, whatever. That's I don't know, by the by. What you're describing is a fairly steady rate of weight gain. So, what you did there isn't bad. The most important driver of a bulk, other than training, which we'll come to next, is making sure you have a sufficient and consistent calorie surplus.
Okay.
Second to that is what? Nutritional need.
Protein intake?
Protein intake, yeah. So
Okay.
how was your protein intake at that time? Because I'm looking at your email and you said that currently your calorie intake is around 2,500 and your protein is around 217.
Yeah.
So that's high.
Okay.
That's higher than what I would say you necessarily need.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for someone your height, weight, 200, the 180 to 200 range would be fine.
Okay.
And when you're cutting, and then when you're bulking, even a little less than that is likely fine. We need more protein when we cut because it's muscle sparing.
Okay.
And so let's say that, here's a question, between 160 to 180 grams protein a day, do you think you were in or around that range when you were bulking most of the time?
I think I was. I mean, the calculator says 217, but there were probably more often than not that I didn't quite get there because that's kind of a task in itself to eat that much protein. But
okay,
at least it was for me anyway. So yeah, I would probably be in that range that you mentioned there. Yeah.
So that's checkbox number 2 for nutrition, right? Your calorie intake was steadily going up, or rather your weight was steadily going up because you're pushing the calorie intake. Check. Check for your protein. Great. Now let's look at your carbs and fats. Were you skewing things really heavily toward fat at any point?
During my bulk?
Yeah.
Yeah. Higher than what those numbers are that you have there. Yeah.
Well, you're going to have lower numbers here, so your fat's like 80 there. But were you actively trying to have like a keto /
No. Oh, no. Not in that regard. No. Mm-mm.
Okay, right. So then, all right. So you're probably, no. Your fat intake probably wasn't exceeding 40% of total calories. More likely around the 30%-ish mark. That's totally fine. The reason I'm pointing this out is because if you eat a lot of dietary fat, it is easier for that to get stored as fat.
Yeah.
And so this pushing for very high fat diets when bulking, I think, is just not a good idea. Okay, so we can check that box off. So then the only other boxes really here that we have to look at are the health ones. And this isn't a podcast about health. But what do I mean? Very quickly, some people, not our readers or listeners really, but some people, they make the mistake of ending the diet and then they quit having their salads. They quit having their fruits. They, stop having all of these healthy foods. And they then just go for the quote unquote dirty foods, right? Assuming that you didn't do that and you were just adding in some of these delicious treats, which ultimately were helping you to push past this discomfort that you had because you were feeling too full. That's not a problem, because I've said this before, but this isn't a game of Mario. We don't get bonus health points from like having more fruits and vegetables than we need, for having more vitamins and nutrients than we need. And so, there are no foods that we can eat that by themselves are damaging to health. No specific foods. So, everything really, it sounds like it was covered there. So then the only question mark is, so nothing you did nutritionally was bad. So let's pluck that idea out of there. You were totally fine. You were right to have the pizza with your family, with your daughters. You're all good. You have absolutely my blessing there. Doctor might say, look at your blood markers, right, and see how much saturated fat you got in there, and maybe look at your LDL, etc. But hey, this is not my, it's not my place. These foods, they have a place in a diet as long as you are doing it in moderation. On the training side, this is the big one. You have to be training sufficiently hard. You have to be training sufficiently often. So the volume needs to be there and the intensity needs to be there. Out of like 1 to 10, how close do you think you nailed that for this period while you were gaining?
Not as much as I would have liked to. Trips came into play, other circumstances that kept me out of the gym, and then 3 or 4 days would go by, right? And not all the time, but there would be a week or so here and there that wouldn't be where I wanted it to be. And my goal was 4 days a week. So 4 days a week, do a day of cardio. I don't know if that is proper or not, but I would get in the gym and I'd have a good run and be doing everything I wanted to do week by week, and then something would come up, some activity or function or what it may be, or I'd get ill and I would miss 3 days. And then the following week I would get 2 days in and then miss 2 more days. And that would kind of carry here and there. So it wasn't ideal, but for the most part, I would at least like to think that it was okay, but it could have been better.
Okay. So of the 30 pounds that you gain, let's say that like we can throw 5 to 7 of those out as water, gut content, glycogen. Okay. So now we're looking at, say, 23 pounds, 23 to 25 pounds. How much of that is likely going to be fat versus muscle? We're talking like a 10-month period. I would say if everything was like perfect, you had Brad Schoenfeld, you were in his lab, he was beasting you. Like you at your age / not age really, but training status, you've been training for a while now. You might gain 10 to 13 pounds of muscle. Okay. Like this is if everything, like perfect. This is everything plus better luck, right?
Yeah.
I think we need to take maybe 20% off of that.
Yeah.
And then so somewhere like 7 to 10 pounds.
Okay.
And that is going to make quite the meaningful difference to your physique.
Really?
It's not going to sound like it, but if you, next time you're in that supermarket and go and have a look at the meat section, it's going to make quite the meaningful difference in your physique. It's going to make a difference in how your t-shirts fit. Obviously, you've gone up a size in t-shirts recently, right?
Yeah.
It's going to make a difference there.
Things are a little snug, yeah.
How you look, how you feel. it's going to make quite a difference. And then the only question is, at that point where you get leaner again, do you then want to repeat it? Do you then want to, you may have now got a taste and you're like, ooh, I want to go and try that again. Because you can imagine what doing that again over the course of the next, say, 14, 15 months is going to do for you. So
Okay.
I think that's likely.
Good.
How does
Yeah.
that sound?
That sounds really nice. I mean, and that's what I've been kind of afraid of is, if I go back into another cut, am I just going to literally be what I was in summer of 2019? Super lean, no muscle really gained after all this weight gain and stuff. That's kind of floating in the back of my mind that could happen. But with your assessment there, 7 pounds, 6, 7, 8 pounds would be quite noticeable in that scale. So
How did your lifting change at that time? Like, are you able to lift considerably more?
yeah,
Yeah.
I've gone up in weight. I do a lot of, and I'm such a novice at gym terms that I don't even know.
It's okay.
But I do, I've noticed an uptick in bench press and incline press and even a little bit in my deadlifts and stuff like that. But at being 42, almost 43, that's where I kind of get stuck too, is how far do I want to push myself? Because, I've got a family and kids and now I'm working and that's kind of lingering in the back of my mind that don't go too far, don't push too much to injure yourself, right? So sometimes I don't know if maybe I could push another 2 pounds on a lift or 5 pounds or whatnot. But it's that lingering, am I going to injure myself? Kind of comes creeping in a little bit. So, but to answer your question, yeah, I have noticed over this last winter that the weight has gone up, even if some of it slightly, but I have noticed an uptick for sure.
Do you have those numbers in your head? I don't need you to say them, but do you have those numbers in your head right now, or do you need to think and look at your records?
Oh, lifting numbers?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I have.
You don't need to look.
Oh,
You
okay.
have to look, right?
I have some. Yeah, I have like those basic ones I mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, you would know. Okay, that's good. Because when someone doesn't know how much they've improved with like 5 seconds of thought, that's not a good sign.
Okay.
Because I want them to be going in the gym
Okay.
and knowing exactly what they're going to be aiming to lift that week
Yeah.
for that session.
Okay.
Because they've got a target and they're really determined.
Okay.
But you raise another point here, which is super important as well. You want to do this, but not at the risk of some kind of injury that's going to not only set you back, but potentially take away from your freedom and ability to play with your daughters. So what can we do here? This is something that you wrote in your answers when you were applying to come on, and it stuck out to me, and I did want to ask you about it, so I'm glad that you brought it up.
Oh, okay.
Have you had an injury in the past?
Yeah. I had nothing bad, right? No breaks or anything crazy, but I had I can't remember the term of it, but it was essentially inflamed, a bursa, inflamed where your tendons are in one of my knees, in my right knee on the inside where the two tendons constantly rub, and it got to a point where I couldn't do some of those moves, and I went to therapy, and I was doing PT for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, trying to rectify that. So yeah, that's kind of been the biggest, is always the knees, right? And I don't know if that's just with me or a lot of people that get into their 40s, but it kind of freaks you out a little bit when your knee twinges and hurts. And then I backed off. That was actually in the realm of a lot of this too, is some knee stuff. And I mentioned that, but yeah, so I have had a little bit of injury. Yeah.
Was that particularly around the Beachbody period with that HIIT work and the
Yep.
box jumps, I imagine,
Yep.
lunges, burpees, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then it was COVID. So we bought a Peloton and I was hammering that Peloton bike constant, like daily hitting that thing. And then I'm doing this workout on the side. And then that's when I started noticing, oh, this isn't going how I want it to go. So yeah.
There's a classic mistake of you had the time, so you were going to spend the time in a new hobby, and you're obsessed about that new hobby.
Yeah.
And look, I've done this. In fact, I was in such. I'll say it anyway. I'm totally fine now, Mum. If you are listening, please do not worry. But I was in such pain for the first time in my life. I was in such pain. This was about 6 weeks ago, that I was on the couch crying. I never had that in my life, but I'd never had that in my life. I was crying, right? In front of my girlfriend.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah.
We'll live together, so it's fine. But like, it was like I was just an absolute mess, and my mistake was your mistake, was all of our mistakes. It was doing too much, too often, going too hard. So I just got back from the UK. I was seeing my dad. He was in hospital. It ended up being 7 weeks. I was there for 3 weeks. He made it out. He walked out. He wasn't on a stretcher.
Okay, that's good. Yeah,
which was good. It was good. Yeah. He said that was his goal. He was stretchered in, but he walked out himself. So that's great. Didn't die. And I came back, and I've got this cycling race that I'm going to do. I'm kind of new to cycling. I just do it as a hobby, but I entered this race for fun because girlfriend and our father and brother are going to do it. But they're all like really, really good. And so I don't want to embarrass myself. And so I have this indoor bike. And so I was hammering myself there. I was hammering myself outside, did too much, too often. My lower back just said, nope. And then I started stretching, trying to do, I ramped up the stretching, ramped up the mobility work, trying to fix it. Had the opposite effect.
Oh, no.
And then now I'm in absolute agony. Fortunately, I managed to get some very strong painkillers, and I managed to work my way back into things, and I'm feeling good now. But I've been there.
Yeah.
But it's that classic thing of not realizing what we're doing. We're going from 0 to 100 so fast. And the body, it's not so much the muscles. We can cope with the muscle sorenesses, so that the joints can't handle it, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's the joints, the elbows, knees, all that stuff just can't. I don't know how old you are, Andy, but 40 is...
41.
Okay, I'm 42. So yeah, it's... Our joints aren't what they were when we were 23,
Do you get joint pain when you do your lifting now?
No, I haven't. So I've tried to stretch a little more and do a little bit more of that work. I see a chiropractor every other week, and he kind of, makes sure everything is good to go in that department. And I haven't had any issues. Sometimes if I push it really hard, I'll get something, but nothing how it used to be. Sometimes you get a little precursor. Ooh, if you keep going, you're going to feel that. But other than that, no, it's been a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, great. What I'd say to you, I want you to be able to push hard and not train with any fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know you're doing the squat, bench, and deadlift and a bunch of other exercises there. And I think you should keep them as long as you don't have any joint pain, and keep trying to nudge things up.
Okay.
As best you can. Building the reps until you can then build the load, dropping the reps back down.
Okay.
So if you're doing, say, sets of 8 to 10, then, or let's say you're doing sets of 8 and you can't add any more weight to the bench, try and get sets of 9 and try and get until you can do 3 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 10, however many sets you're doing. By the time you can do that, you can probably add another 5 pounds on the bench, and then you drop down to that 8 rep target again, and you just keep building from there.
Okay, I like that idea. Yeah.
Slow, just nice and slow. I also want you to be able to push really, really hard, which is going to help you maintain muscle as you lean out. May even still grow a little bit if it's bumping up in your intensity.
Okay.
But you're going to need to do something where you can feel confident that you're not going to injure yourself. I know you said that you have access to a really well-equipped gym, I'd like you to use some of those machines there. So you've just done your bench press, and that technically, that's your horizontal pressing done. Screw it. Go over, do 2 sets of seated machine Hammersmith, hammer chest press, or whatever machine chest press you've got. Or you could do dumbbells, but just you can really go to town on that horizontal
Right, yeah.
on machines, right? You're not going to do anything. And same principle as well for, okay, you've done your squats, hop on over and say hello to the leg press.
Okay.
Right? I know you don't want to. I'm sorry. I hate to say this, but do it anyway. Just say hello.
Embrace the suck, like you said before, right?
Exactly. Embrace the suck. So that you're making sure that you are pushing really hard on any of those movement patterns where you're feeling that you need to be careful with the free weights. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. 100%. Yeah.
And then whenever you feel any like pain, discomfort, I want you to see if you can change your grip and or foot position, your angle of motion, your range of motion, and see if that helps.
All right.
If not, lighten the loads. So do higher rep sets. So instead of doing sets of 8, do sets of 15. So that will effectively be lightening the loads. You're still going to go equally close to failure. See if that helps.
Okay.
If not, consider changing the exercise. See if that helps. But don't get dogmatic about your exercise selection and see how your body responds there. Now, what that phrase means is that people often, I was in this camp as well, they would say, well, I have to squat. I have to deadlift.
Right.
No, you don't. You don't have to do shit.
Yeah.
Exercise are the tools to get the job done, right? So don't fall into that trap.
Okay.
And then if you try that and you still have some aches, back off. Drop a set or 2 or 3 for that movement pattern across the week and see if that slight reduction in volume helps.
Changes. Okay.
Yeah, these small, logical, incremental changes. I know they're difficult to do yourself, but if you've got everything written down, which I know you do, then you're going to be able to do that and just run through that framework. I will email you after this, like that kind of troubleshooting framework that we give to clients.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and I think you'll be good. There's one more thread that we need to pull here, and that is, you said, I want to look great for my spouse. I want her to be proud of how her husband looks. No sense for her to embrace the dad bod. She shouldn't have to. Okay, I like that. You don't have a dad bod. You don't have to worry about that. I think the one conversation you do need to have is that you may now be dieting down to a point. For the next 10 pounds, you're fine. But once you get sub 200, you may now be dieting down to a point where she's like, oh, looking a little bit lean thing. Because even though you can be more muscly, you can't control your face, right? And often people react to how we look in the face. So I think you need to have a conversation about what it is you're trying to do and just reassure her that if your intention is to then bulk up after that, that it's just going to be a temporary thing.
Okay. It's a lot. I mean, the face, that's a good point, that how much, fat you carry here in your face. And then when you lean out, your face can look a little gaunt, right? A little thin. And it's something that I guess I didn't even take into consideration. So that you'll see your face when your shirt's on still. So you could look a little thin in that regard. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can tell when a bodybuilder is on and off season, even just if you've got the headshot, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's very obvious. It's very obvious. Yeah. The people forget that.
Yeah.
Can't change your face.
No.
I've had people ask me what they can do about this, and there's literally nothing. Oh, actually, there's probably some shithead company that will sell you a filler or something silly. But
yeah, chew on a jaw at Jazzerciser or whatever I've seen online daily.
Yeah,
something like that.
Right. Anything to feed into the insecurities.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think you'll be set.
Okay, good. That is some good information to go on. So I will take that to heart for sure.
Questions?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it. Just I appreciate you and your brand and your Instagram account in a sea of shit online. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Justin. No, I'll keep trying to. We will keep trying to do our best here. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on and sharing.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Justin, and just a shout out to him for being open with us and coming on the show. I know that isn't easy. Speaking of which, if you'd like to come on the show, just shoot me an email to andy@ripbody.com and tell me that you'd like to be on. I'll ping over the application form for you. Now, in terms of what we can do, I think the biggest thing that we can do, we have the website. I've been working on that for 14 years. Free articles. It's exactly what I mentioned in the pod. It's what I would have wanted when I was 20 years old. It's just I wasn't mature enough to actually trust it. Tens of thousands of people read that every month, and I feel truly blessed to be able to have an impact. So really, if you have any questions, please reach out to me in the comments. I answer them daily, and I have been doing so for the last 14 years. If you'd like to purchase the book, we have the Muscle and Strength Pyramids, which you can see over my left shoulder, and we have the Diet Adjustments Manual. If you're interested in coaching, this is what we do. This is what we love. Please go to ripbody.com/coaching, and you can apply there, and I'd love to see how we can help. All right. Thank you. And I look forward to catching you next time.